Nice
Right.
to see you, Rabbi.
So we are doing Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 101, and we're almost done. We're at the last, the very last, number 6, Vov. So most of us probably don't use lamps for light in the house anymore. We have electric lights, just occasionally candlelit dinner or something. But we're going to discuss the wicks, and we'll see it's also relevant to nowadays a little bit as well. So Vav, number 6, psilois. If you have wicks, shehinlak behem b'yom tov rishon, you lit them on the first day Yom Tov. So they were the candles. So let's use in our example, we use them for Yom Tov candles, because most of us aren't using it for regular. The kavel, and they went out, they were extinguished. Okay, now on Yom Tov we can't extinguish a fire, so we didn't extinguish ourselves. Sometimes it happens, blows out, something else happened, whatever happened to be. You're allowed to relight these on the second day Yom Tov. Now, not as a Yom Tov candles. Right? Yom Tov candles, you normally take fresh candles, but now let's decide. But you wanted some extra lights or some candles on the table, or just to make it whatever it is. But the fact that they went out the first day, you're allowed to light it on the second day. Now you might be asking, well, why wouldn't you? Well, we're going to see in a minute. But on the 2 days Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah, so as we mentioned last few weeks, that any time that we look at Rosh Hashanah as one long day, it's only to make it stricter, not to make it more lenient. And so in this case, we can't relight it on second day Rosh Hashanah. You can't relight it. Why? What's the problem with relighting the wicks went out? We can't light these ones that were lit the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Even to light the other end. You have some type of wick that's got, maybe the candle has 2 wicks coming out of each, the wick comes out of each end, goes through it. You still can't do it. And we're going to see in a minute. We call Malkim nevertheless, mutus betil tolas sirum l'seis chadashes. You are allowed to move them, since you're allowed to light candles on Yom Tov. Candles aren't muksa, so you're allowed to move them and put new candles. So you could take them out of the candelabra, whatever it is, and put in new candles. V'chein b'Yom Tov shlach Shabbos. Likewise, if you have a Yom Tov after Shabbos, it's Saturday night, Sunday. So you have these candles that went out on Shabbos. You can take them out and put new ones. So let's start to look, what's the problem with lighting? So what happens, a wick that's charred a little bit, it's been lit and charred, it becomes a better wick. It's easier to light. And so essentially what you're doing is you're preparing for one day to the other, it could look like. So on Rosh Hashanah, on other Yom Tovs, not Rosh Hashanah, I'm not so worried about it, because you didn't extinguish it on purpose. It just happened to go out, so it's not the end of the world. But on Yom Tov, it's like on Rosh Hashanah, it's like you pre-prepared it. Now, just as a side point to this, many people have the custom on regular Shabbos or regular Yom Tov, so before Shabbos Yom Tov starts, to light the candles for a moment and then put them out before the candles are lit for the mitzvah, right? So, because it's easier to light, they're better. So usually the man of the house does that, because what happens when it comes to Shabbos and Yom Tov candles, so here we're talking about just light in general for the house, they use candles. But now I'm talking about specifically the candles that we do the mitzvah on. So the candles we do the mitzvah on, in concept, men and women are equally obligated. And that happens to be for a variety of reasons. Generally, this mitzvah, the women of the household do. So the man should participate. So often it's the husband who sets up the candles. and the wife lights. And if we're going to do this, then he lights them and puts them out. Yes, David.
In my English, it says that the wicks are permitted to be carried.
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, how are they okay to be carried? Because I thought you're only allowed to carry something that you can use on Yom Tov.
Yeah. So even though we're not using these specific ones, but what we mean to say is that candles in general are not muksa. So when we say carry them, we don't mean now you're gonna, keep them with you all day. What we mean is you're allowed to remove them out of the candlestick and to replace them with new ones.
Oh, I thought it meant like carrying them down the block.
Yeah. No. So it means it means it's not muksa. That's what it means. So no, it's not muksa to be able. So even though these ones we can't relight, we can take them out and replace them ones that we can light. So it's good for the husband to when he sets up the candles to light them momentarily, char the wick a little bit, and then put it out. Also, by the way, this is the origin for the custom that it's the groom or the groom's family normally, but the groom that buys the Shabbos candlesticks when people get married. So one of the gifts that he gives to the bride is the Shabbos candlesticks. So that since he's obligated the mitzvah as well, so he participates by providing the candlesticks. Right? So he participates. Besides that, many people have the custom to set up and different things. On the reverse side of that, many people have a custom that the bride buys the groom a menorah, because it's the same idea. She's also obligated in lighting menorah. But generally the custom is the husband lights to the husband and the wife. So she participates by providing the menorah. So that's anyway. None of those things are absolute obligations. It's just how these customs developed. David.
The idea of the husband lighting, like preparing the candles by pre-lighting them, does this have to do with that it's better that the husband should be the one that puts out the light instead of the wife, that she shouldn't put out the candle?
No, this is just it's his way of participating in the mitzvah.
I heard that.
Yeah, and I mean, if she would do it early enough, I mean, if she's going to do it at the time where you could light Shabbos candles, I mean, I hear what you're saying, that could potentially be an issue, but if she's having because let's go back a step. So what happens is when a lady lights candles, unless she specifically makes a condition otherwise, she brings in Shabbos when she lights candles. So this is even if she lights early. I mean, obviously there's a time that's too early, but once you get to the earliest time, so let's say in the middle of summer, you could have 3.5 hours, let's say, between the earliest time to light and the time you have to light. So if she would light any time in that time, normally she brings in Shabbos when she lights Shabbos candles. So probably what you're referring to is that if a person will light during that time, even though they're not necessarily intending to light Shabbos candles, but it is their Shabbos candles, and then it could feel like they brought in Shabbos, and to put them out could be problematic. So it's not really an issue if she's doing it for this reason. In other words, if she decided beforehand, I'm doing this to set up the wicks. In other words, she's having a specific intention. I'm not lighting Shabbos candles now. I'm preparing the wicks. So it's not really going to be an issue. However, it looks funny, like putting out Shabbos candles. So, you could say that's another advantage of the husband doing it. But the primary reason that the husband does it is so he can participate in the mitzvah. That's his way of participating.
What I was asking was, I heard, and we've been doing this since I heard it, that when you're making Havdalah, at the end of Havdalah, the man should be the one that puts out the Havdalah candle rather than the woman, because the woman played a part or something regarding where there was the fire came, the Adam and Chava. I forget the details, but for decades I never heard such a thing, and now I heard it from a reliable person, and I started to do it.
So even then, even if the lady is the one holding the candle, it's the man who pours the wine from the cup anyway. So, so it's going to happen automatically. All right. Yeah,
Rabbi,
Susan.
one quick question.
Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So if one of my candles blew out on the menorah, I have to take a brand new one and relight it?
No. So we're talking about on Yom Tov, because Yom Tov, it's an issue of preparing the wicks, which is a Yom Tov issue. Although we're allowed to make a fire to cook, but we can't make a fire to prepare wicks. So this becomes a byproduct. So we're not speaking. I mentioned the menorah as a side point. So menorah, if we had enough oil and enough wicks, and the wick was good enough and the oil was sufficient, that it should be able to stay lit the amount of time it's meant to. If it goes out, you actually do not have to relight it.
So you leave it alone.
Custom is we do, except on Shabbos, obviously. The
Right.
Friday night, if it goes on Shabbos, we can't do anything. But during the weekdays, we're not obligated to relight it, but we do relight it as a, just to have like greater care, go beyond the letter of the law.
Without bracha.
Yes, correct, without a bracha. And but he was speaking about if a candle went out on Yom Tov, you lit it first day Yom Tov and it went out. And so let's not talk about Yom Tov candles. Let's talk about for using candles for light in the house. And you're allowed to use it on second day Yom Tov, and this is really a bit of a novelty, because normally we say things that are prepared on first day, you can't prepare on first day for second day. And here, seemingly, we prepared the wick on first day for second day. But since it was never the intention, we were planning for this candle to burn out, it just happened, whatever reason, it went out, it's not an issue. Okay, so chapter 102. So 8 of Tavshilins. Let's give a little introduction. So as we've mentioned over the last chapter or two, you can prepare going up for holiness. So on a weekday, you can prepare for Yom Tov, but on Yom Tov, you can't prepare for a weekday. But Shabbos is a holier day, higher level of holiness than Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, you're allowed to prepare for Shabbos. So let's say, for example, Yom Tov was Thursday, Friday. Now I'm speaking from a Torah perspective, not with rabbinical law, but from the basic Torah perspective. If Yom Tov was Thursday, Friday, and immediately after was Shabbos, you can do whatever you need, whatever's necessary, not necessarily lots of extras, but whatever's necessary for Shabbos. So let's say, for example, you need to bake challah for Shabbos, you need to cook chicken, so you're going to need the dough and the challah, you're going to do all kinds of things. You're going to set up candles, you're going to light a fire to light the Shabbos candles. You can do all of that on Yom Tov, because Shabbos is more powerful than Yom Tov, is more high level of holiness, and it takes priority. However, our sages, when I say our sages, we're still talking about in biblical times. Right, possibly first base of Mikdash times. There was a concern. The concern was like this. Unfortunately, not everyone is highly educated in Judaism. So this person, so what happens is, a simple person, not so well educated, and this year, where it went Yom Tov immediately followed by Shabbos, he cooked on Yom Tov for the day after Yom Tov, which was Shabbos, and that's no problem. But he didn't realize the only reason I was allowed to do this was because the following day was Shabbos. He mistakenly thought that not only am I allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Yom Tov, I'm even allowed to cook on Yom Tov for after Yom Tov, which you can't do, because a regular weekday after Yom Tov is a lower level of holiness. It's only when Shabbos, which is a higher level of holiness, that you're allowed to do it. So there could be this misconception. So to avoid this misconception, our sages came up with what's called 8 of Tavshilin. Erev Tavshilin is essentially, we'll loosely call it a ceremony, for lack of better word, where we officially start our Shabbos preparations before the Yontiv, and we say a blessing. We make this type of Erev, and only with this are we allowed to cook on Yontiv for Shabbos. So it's to emphasize to the people who are not as educated as they could be, that, oh, I can cook today for after Yontiv because I made an Erev Tavshilin. Oh, it's Shabbos. I made this. So it makes sure that people don't make the mistake to think that it's okay to cook on Yontiv or do other things on Yontiv for after Yontiv, even when it's not Shabbos. You know, they might come to think they could even do it during a weekday. So this chapter is going to speak about the process and exactly what you need to do and how you do it and what happens if you got to do it and things like that. Okay, any questions on the introduction? All right, so let's get started. Aleph, number 1. Yontiv shechali yois be'erev Shabbos. You have a Yontiv that falls out on Friday. Asur la'afos, you're not allowed to bake or lavashel, b'kteira, to cook in a pot, michedes Shabbos, anything that's especially for Shabbos. Now, as we said, on a Torah level you can, but rabbinically you can't. Ella, unless al yedei erev tavshilin, unless this is done through the process of erev tavshilin, she'oyse be'erev Yontiv, which you made on the day before Yontiv. You made it prior to Yontiv. So how do you do that? The hainu, this means sh'lekeach eze tavshil, you take some type of cooked food, or tzali, or roasted food, right? So in other words, you take an egg or a piece of meat or a piece of fish, like an actual, not the baked food, not the breads and things, a meal food. Something that you normally eat with the bread with a meal. So let's say people use an egg, a piece of chicken, a piece of fish, something like that. The gam pas, and you also take a bread. So on Pesach, obviously that's a matzah, but you take, in other words, what you're going to make a motzi on. So you take 2 things. So a cooked dish and a bread type thing. So you take them together, mavarich, and you make the following blessing. So it's left off, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, presuming that you know that, bless you Hashem, King of the universe. And then you keep going, Asher Kedushan Mitzvah, that he made us holy through his mitzvahs. But Tzivanu, and he gave us a mitzvah, al mitzvahs Erev, to do this mitzvah of Erev. And after you make this bracha, ba'oyma, you say the following: B'hadeina ruva, with this Erev, this ceremony, whatever we want to call it, Yeshara lano, we now become permitted, lafuye, to bake, lavashule, and to cook, latmunei, and a little means to hide, but today we put things on a like in a crock pot or a electric stove, but they used to bury things in the ashes of coals and different things. That's what it means to hide. But luke and shraga, to light a light, the mervaid, and to do kol tzarkana, all the needs, the Yom Tov Shabbos, that I need for Shabbos and Yontiv. So even though, as I said, on a Torah level, he's permitted to do this anyway, but to avoid misconceptions, it's only allowed rabbinically to do these things on Yontiv if he first makes the Erev. The im eino mavin loshen zeh. Now, if he doesn't understand these words, because these words are Aramaic, and they were specifically put in Aramaic so simple people can understand. I won't say simple people, we don't mean, simple as in, we don't mean slow, but not everyone understands Aramaic. Not everyone understood Hebrew. So therefore it was put in Aramaic. So people, that was the language in the Second Temple period. Most people spoke Aramaic. And so they should understand. So if nowadays, when many people don't understand Aramaic, so if you study the Talmud, you get a basic grasp of reasonable grasp of Aramaic. If you don't, then probably you don't speak Aramaic. So if you don't understand, you should say this in whatever language you understand. So if English is the main language you understand, and you don't really understand Aramaic so much, say it in English. It's no problem. Most parts of davening, Okay, there are certain parts of davening you have to understand the translation to fulfill the mitzvah. For example, the first two sentences in Shema, the first blessing of the Amidah of the Shemon Esrei. But majority of davening, although obviously it's better if you understand every word, but you fill the mitzvah if you don't, and it's probably better to daven in Hebrew without understanding the words than to daven in English, even though you do understand. Maybe it's good to have an English translation and to read along as you go so you do understand. And now they're printing a lot of Siddurim that have the translation either right next to or right underneath the Hebrew words. And so you can read the Hebrew and simultaneously look at the English. And, today, thank God, there's so many different things available. But it's important because the words themselves are holy. These words of davening have a certain kedusha, a certain holiness, that it's better to say those words. But over here, this isn't a davening. This is a statement. You're making a statement. I'm accomplishing this with this action. So if you don't understand what you're saying, it doesn't have an effect. Now, if you happen to know, because you read the English translation beforehand, that these words, this sentence means this, that's also fine. But, having someone just make an Abd Shillim without them understanding in the slightest what these words mean actually doesn't achieve anything. Yeah, David.
Maybe you want to mention how it is that so people don't get confused. Person saying that Hashem commanded us, and I just read last night that there are 7 commandments from the rabbis, but this includes Erev.
Correct.
So a person would find this question and know what to answer.
All right. So, okay, it's a good point that we see by many rabbinic mitzvahs. For example, just recently we lighting Hanukkah candles, right, which is not one of the 613 mitzvahs. It was brought in by sages, and we say in the blessing, bless you, Hashem, and then we say, Shek Hashem, that you commanded us. So this goes on a variety of levels. On a most simple level, we have a mitzvah to listen to the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin told us to do this. So why are we doing it? Because Sanhedrin said, but why are we listening to the Sanhedrin? Because Hashem told us we should listen to the Sanhedrin, to our sages. So therefore, there's that mitzvah. When it comes to Hanukkah, we have another aspect to it. In other words, there's a mitzvah to thank Hashem for miracles. And there was this incredible miracle that happened at Hanukkah. And this is how we're doing it. So even though in this mitzvah to thank Hashem for miracles wasn't specifically mentioned Hanukkah candles, because it didn't happen yet at the time of Mount Sinai, but it's included in that. So in this case, it's more that we're listening to our sages, and it's also, we have a mitzvah of safeguarding, of putting fence around mitzvahs, which is another mitzvah that we have. And so in this case, this is to safeguard that people don't have the misconception. So another example of the safeguarding is muksa. Right? As we keep explaining, and we use a classic example, the prohibition is to write. So the sages came and made muksa, and again, sages means biblical times, that we don't even move a pencil or a pen. We don't even use a writing implement. Why? Because if you're allowed to, some people like just play with a pen, and which on a biblical level is okay. But then what happens? And then they start to doodle. Oh, and they broke Shabbos. So if we put a safeguard around it, we say, since this pen or pencil or quill, whatever it is, has no purpose on Shabbos because I can't write, so therefore I can't even handle it. So then if a person forgets for a second, what did he do? He picked up the pen, he goes, whoops, and he puts it down, and he never wrote Shabbos. So that's also a safeguard. Now, in this case, we don't say a blessing, because you only say a blessing something you do, not something you don't do. So muksa is not handling something. So I'm not doing it. I've got nothing to say a blessing on because I didn't do anything. But in this case, the safeguard, we're doing something. So we can make a blessing on that as well. So these are some of the reasons why we make a blessing on.
Rabbi Ezra has.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ezra.
Yeah. So I have a fundamental problem with the fact that we're saying Hashem commanded us.
Yeah.
In the sense of, why not say something to the effect that Hashem commanded us to listen to our Rabbanim who then define this particular mitzvah. And that way we understand what exactly the connection was, as opposed to saying Hashem commanded us, and then someone goes and tries to find this written b'sher somewhere, and they can't, and they say that this isn't, this is not true.
Okay, very good question. So there's a few aspects to it. So one aspect is that we keep the brachas uniform, right? In other words, a uniform formula. So let's say the mitzvah of Luv and Esrog or Sukkah and Shofar, which are mitzvahs the Torah. So the blessing is Sher Kedushalom b'mitzvah. In other words, that is the blessing. So when we make a rabbinic mitzvah, so although it's rabbinic, but once it's brought in, we bring it in on a. I'm not going to say it's exactly the same as a Doraisa, as a one of the 613 mitzvahs, but it's as close as you're going to get. So therefore, the blessing stays uniform. So that's one reason. A second reason is if you actually look at the blessing, part of it is a general statement, right? Sher Kedushalom Mitzvosov. He makes us, we'll say, holy, for lack of a better translation, with his mitzvahs. So that's a general statement. That's the praise of Hashem. We're praising Hashem, that Hashem gives us a certain level of spirituality, or allows us to connect or draw down a certain level of spirituality through mitzvahs. Now, Vitzivano, and we are commanded about this mitzvah. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he commanded us. I mean, we are commanded, and again, even though it's rabbinic, so it might be a different level of spirituality we draw down, but part of that was the general praise, and we do draw it down. So they're the main two sort of points. Now, here what you're saying about can lead to a certain level of confusion. Now, on a certain level, we would say that we would expect people to have an understanding of what is part of the 613 mitzvahs and what's rabbinic. At least, let's say, for example, let's use Hanukkah as an example. We would expect, now, I'm not saying we expect that today, right? Because unfortunately, there's some Jews today who don't know the first thing about Judaism. But until modern times, let's say, there would have been a certain expectation that people would understand that Hanukkah came later. So even if they didn't understand exactly why we say that blessing, it wouldn't cause that level, of confusion. So that, this formula of the blessing, let's say that's over 2,000 years old, probably wouldn't really have been an issue, if at all, until, very modern times. So hopefully someone wouldn't make that, that misconception wouldn't affect them. But it is possible. It is. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, it is possible that someone could say, get confused, but that's why the blessing has that formula. And I give it as another example. Let's say, a mitzvah about eating, whether it's a mitzvah we should eat or mitzvah we shouldn't eat. So the amount that you need to eat if you are eating, or if it's a negative prohibition, the amount that if someone would eat, they have to bring some type of sacrifice or there'll be a consequence, is a kazayas, right? Is the size of is the volume of an olive, a larger olive we have today, and it includes the pip and various things. So whenever we have a rabbinic mitzvah about eating, they always make it the same as the biblical. So again, whether it's something you have to eat or something you're not allowed to eat, again, so kazayas becomes the measurement. So whenever we set up a rabbinic commandment, it's always set up in the same fashion as the Torah mitzvah. So that's why it has the same formula of the blessing. Okay. All right, number 2. Now, this cooked food has to be the type of cooked food you normally eat with bread. Now, today, we don't eat anything with bread anymore. Used to be, and again, till modern times in the Western world, it used to be every meal was based on bread, right? And bread was the staple. And, you have comments in Shulchan Aruch, someone, if he doesn't wash from Shabbos to Shabbos, he's like a holy Jew. It's like someone special, because it meant like he never had a proper meal. Today you don't wash from Shabbos to Shabbos, because your 30 kilos of pizza that you ate was all somehow called mazonos, and your bagel was mazonos, and everything else. So it doesn't really count. But in the past, bread was the basis of the meal. So when we're talking about a cooked food, it's something you would normally eat with bread. It was the norm to eat with bread. Going, for example, basa, meat, dogim, fish, or beitzim, eggs. But other things, that it's not the norm to eat with bread. Loy mahani, it doesn't help if you had those things. Now, I'm not really so if you had, for example, sort of let's say roasted grains, you don't eat together with bread, or porridge, oatmeal. Right, it's a cooked food, cooked oatmeal, but it's not. You don't normally eat oatmeal with bread. Those types of things. So you need to have something that's normally eaten as part of a meal. That's number one. Now, how much do you need? So shir hatavshil kazais. The amount of the food has to be kazai. So this measurement that I just mentioned before, so because that's what's considered eating, and actually eating. So, for an example, having a taste of something. Let's say, a person is cooking soup, and they want to taste to see, do I need to season it a bit more? So they have a little sip. Okay, that's not called eating. Now, obviously, having a 10-course meal, something else. So where do you draw the line? What's considered eating? So we say eating this amount called a kazais, which, because it's a volume, is going to vary from food to food, in about 4 minutes. But see, we just noticed the time went over time, so I'm going to get in trouble. That's all right. So we shall continue tomorrow, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful
Thanks, everybody.
afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi. Bye. all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Take
So
care.
you have to eat it within 4 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, now it says 4 minutes. It's 4 after 4. I wasn't sure where the 4 minutes.
That's right.
Thank you.